Hi, I'm Dave Miller, Director of College Counseling at Stevenson School in Pebble Beach, and I'd like to welcome you to this segment of College Prep for You. This is our second season, and this is the sixth broadcast in this second season. Today we're going to talk about all forms of standardized testing. Last year when I tried to give this program, I had a guest, a student here with me, and I also had a little DVD on UCLA, and I was trying to do too many things, and I ran out of time, and I really couldn't do a good job. This year, I want to apologize for a couple things. One, my voice is a little hoarse, and secondly, we're probably going to be relying more on a lecture format, presentation of a lot of information, rather than a casual discussion and a lot of movement back and forth. So I hope it's not, dry or boring for you, but there's lots and lots of information I want to get out, dealing with lots of different testing here. In prior programs this year, we've started out with a broad overview of college counseling. We had, in the second show we had held in our chapel, we had a panel of college admissions people and a panel of our students. They were asking questions, they had a dialogue. Then we had our about 200 people in the audience ask some questions as well. So a good broad general overview. We've also talked about financial aid. We talked about the UC system and the Cal State system. And we're just sort of putting together the little nuts and bolts. And this week we want to focus on this standardized testing, which seems to be the bugaboo of this whole process. In subsequent weeks, we'll break down the process pretty much in line with what we're doing with our junior class right now. In fact, we had a meeting with our juniors today, and we talked about a broad overview of what they're going to be doing this spring, the things we're going to ask them to compile. So we're going to be more in line with the real dates that are happening right now. We're pretty much done with the seniors. The seniors have gotten all their applications in because the due dates were January 1st, and some are January 15th, some are February 15th. But the seniors are pretty much done, and we're turning our attention to the juniors. And we have a wide variety of ways that we contact the juniors. But in these next programs, they'll pretty much be in sync with what all juniors should be doing all over Monterey County. The genesis of this show is to help people in Monterey County, the families, all the students, the high school, so it goes out all over Monterey County to help in this process. All you have to do is dial in channel 26, cable. And then this show originally airs live, and then there are 5 or 6 subsequent showings in the next 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks from now, we're going to have another program on the 20th, and that'll deal with thinking about college, getting into some of the philosophical backgrounds. Now, I want to say up front a little disclaimer here. I'm not a real fan of standardized testing. In fact, I think that it probably does more harm than good, and I think that it's money-driven. In fact, if I'd have thought about it, I would have brought this little button that I gave to our students last year. An anti-test group sent me a whole box of buttons, and they went like wildfire at our school. It said, "I am not my test score. I am not my test score." And too often we get caught up in who we are. I'm a football player, I'm an A student, I'm a scientist, I'm a computer guy, I'm a mechanic, I'm a hot rod, whatever. And for sure, we don't want to get caught up in this game of I am the person who goes to such and such a school, or I'm my grades, or I am my test score. So that's a bias I have. And while I'm going to try to be objective and tell you what I know about standardized tests, know that it's all colored by that thought. So let's get started here. Overall, we're going to talk about testing, the good, the bad, the ugly, lots of different options. I'll give some test tips for you, and give some advice, tell you where things are. A lot of A, B, C types of things, also a little bit of philosophy. So let's get started with, here are the topics. A rationale for testing, either good reasons for testing, bad reasons for testing, and you can argue a lot on your own, but the fact of the matter is we've got to do testing. We're going to talk about the PSAT, which is the preliminary Scholastic aptitude test, which sophomores and juniors take. The SAT-1, the reasoning test, that's what most people take. That's the big hoop that people have to jump through. Fewer people have to take the SAT-2, which is this subject test, and we'll discuss what it's like, who's got to take them, and what they can do for you. The alternative to these is the ACT, the American College Testing. It's a test that's a little more favored in the Midwest and in the South, but it's honored everywhere, so you have a choice of taking all of these. And then one that not too many people will take. This is the test of English as a foreign language. This is what people who are not native speakers, people who don't live and grow up and live in the country, these colleges still like to see some evidence that they're able to function in an institutional setting and they can use English at the speed that they need to get through the coursework. And then the last thing are AP exams. And not all schools have APs, but the schools that do have AP exams, the APs tend to be the coin of the realm. In fact, there's a real growing trend for high schools to adopt APs, and we tend to measure the quality of a school, the breadth of a school, by how many APs they have. And that's good to an extent because APs are supposed to be taught along a national curriculum with highly qualified teachers in the same way that, with the same standards, the same benchmarks as college courses, but in some cases that can hold true, like for English and history, and even calculus is probably the best example, where it's not bad to test kids at the college level while they're in high school, but there are some courses that are AP courses, some of the science courses, the lab science courses, AP biology in particular, where it's almost impossible to approximate what goes on at college. In fact, my wife is an advanced biology teacher, and she's refused to call her classes AP biology just because you can't have all the labs you need. And we personally give advice, as do the colleges and do pre-med programs. Even if a student places out of a course with an AP biology or AP chemistry, we suggest that they take that course in college anyway because it's so important. So this can be the breadth of our topics today, basically standardized testing, what they do, the good they do, the harm they do, and so forth. Okay, let's start with a rationale. I'm going to give you some positive reasons for testing and also the negatives against testing. I've tried to be unbiased and objective, although you know what my bias is. There obviously is a need for testing. It's been around for a long time, and it's endorsed, and people sort of put up with it, and I don't think it's going to go away. So let me share some ideas why people want testing. First of all, when students apply to a college, excuse me, colleges like to see an array of information. The more information they get, the more they can make fine distinctions about how qualified the candidate is. And there's almost a direct proportion. The higher up the food chain, the more selective the school is, the more information they want. So imagine a pie, an academic pie with many slices in it. The main slice is the transcript. It will be always, first and foremost, the most important thing at every school through all time, in the future, in the past. It never changes. Hard courses in a hard class, how you do in those, that's the main criteria for getting into college. And after that, there are probably 6 or 7 other things. Standardized test scores tend to be second at the most selective schools. An essay, a contest, how you do in mathletics, SAT 2 exams, a teacher recommendation, a counselor recommendation, a variety of ways to show your prowess academically. But the most important thing is the transcript and then the testing. The more selective the school is, the more they rely on that testing. And they like more than one test. They like the ones and the twos. So slice of the pie is pretty important here. Secondly, a key idea that you need to keep in mind is that SAT 1s and 2s and a variety of tests happen to take on more importance the more selective the school is. So everybody doesn't have to do them, but if you want to try for those golden ring, the brass ring schools, you need to go through the hoops there with the tests. Okay, thirdly, and I think this is probably a good reason, testing helps determine the speed at which one does school. Now there's learning and then there's schooling. People learn in different ways at different rates, but standardized testing helps adults and educators figure out how you can keep pace. Like everybody can do the work. Most everybody, a reasonable mind can do and a reasonable work ethic can do the work at the toughest schools. Maybe not MIT or Swarthmore, but most of the tough schools. Like you could go to Dartmouth and probably struggle and get by and make it out of there. You may not get as much out of the school. You might feel like Swiss cheese or chopped liver when you're done. You might develop an inferiority complex. So my thought when I talk to parents and students is like, why would you do that to yourself? Why would you want to be in that sort of a school where people go much faster than you and you feel like you're less than worthy? Just like you shouldn't want to go to a school that is too easy for you and you're done quickly and you're waiting for everybody else to catch up. That doesn't make any sense either. So the goal is to find the right school that has the right match for your talents and your speed. Now some people are faster at doing homework, writing tests, writing essays, and so forth. But these standardized tests can go a long way towards determining how rapidly, how quickly, how efficiently you process information. And it's unfortunate. Some people are really, really fast and get it, and they've got these photographic minds, everything's fine. And other people sort of slug it in there and hang in and got to work hard and break rocks. So I'm not sure it's great to put those sorts of people together. So I think it's a valid rationale. Another sort of negative thing is that they ease the decision making for these colleges. They need to process, like big public schools need to process lots and lots of kids. And basically they're looking at your class rank, GPA, and SATs. And almost a computer can do this processing. The more selective the school, the smaller the school, the more sophisticated they are, the more information they need, and the more they learn about you. There's a big folder that they look at, a dossier, and they try to ferret out who you really are. And again, you're not your score, you're not your grade. You know, they're looking for leadership, they're looking for character, they're looking for a whole community. So for the bigger schools, it's pretty easy to use the numbers, and you understand that. Okay, another good, a couple other good ideas. Homogeneity of a class. Like a college wants to get everybody who are basically on the same line, they can do the same things. They don't want these big jagged edges of a graph of different things. They want people to basically be able to do the same work and make the same demands. A huge factor in this rationale is that the faculty, the professors, demand kids at a certain level. You know, they want to start off and they want to take off and they want the best kids. And of course it's easy to teach the really bright kids, the smarter kids, and everybody, you know, likes to do that because it's easy. You don't have to work as hard, and it's more fun. You like the discussions. You like that feeling of success. But colleges are for everybody, and there are different levels of college for different levels of schooling. You know, public schools, private schools, schools in rich districts, schools in poor districts, schools for late bloomers, and schools for kids who've, you know, had it easy all their lives. So again, the idea is to get into the right place with the right professors and not have too disparate, too diverse of a student body in terms of ability levels. And that's what the faculty wants. Okay, this is probably a really good reason and probably the most important reason. Standardized test scores verify the quality of academics. And let me explain why here. It'll take a second or so. You can go to your local school and ask how many people have straight A's, how many have a 4.0, or just read it in the Herald or the Californian, because they publish these honors lists. You start counting those dots. There are hundreds, 150, I've gotten up to 160 in the high school who have over a 4.0. So what does a 4.0 mean if everybody has one? When the stretch is from a 3.6 to a 4.3, that's just too heavy, it's too top end. So a standardized test score can sort of poke a hole in that balloon and make real ability and real achievement align more clearly. And there's great inflation virtually everywhere, but I think standardized testing makes a universal discriminator. Like people in Keokuk, Iowa are tested the same way people in Gonzales High School are tested. So whether they both have straight A's or not, I think the test score is going to indicate some different level of demands of the school and so forth. And so I can almost go along with that reason. This last reason my wife pointed out for me, good test scores can make up for poor GPA. Now, the kiss of death is to have really good scores and not be able to, or to have really good test scores and not back that up with really good grades, because schools don't want that. But if you have some sort of reason you were sick or moving around a lot and didn't do well in school, but you're basically a bright person, or you were sick for a long time, or whatever reason, I think you can still get the attention of schools by having good test scores. Okay, negative things, other negative things about, or my bias here, the bad things about testing, why we should get rid of it, is that these kids have enough pressure on themselves. And we're just adding on with, you got to get this test score to get into this college, you got to take the test 3 and 4 times. It intrudes on their lives, and it's just a giant pain for a lot of these kids. Philosophically, it dilutes learning. If you're spending all this time on test prep and doing all the games and the strategy, you're not spending time learning about music and art and English and philosophy and psychology. So there's content and then there's process. And these test prep agencies focus on the process at the expense of content and real learning. Simple common sense tells you that these things are very costly and they're time consuming. You can go to one of these courses for 10 weeks. You can spend hundreds of dollars on these tests, as much as $2,000 for a tutor, and probably as little as maybe $35 for a book and a little program that you have. But they use up too much time and too much money here. Probably the big reason that affects me is they're driven by corporations. The testing corporations, Kaplan, Princeton Review, the Education and Testing Service, the College Board itself. When they turn to collegeboard.com from collegeboard.edu, they went from non-money making, non-profit to profit, and that's when they sort of change their thing. So their goal is to sell you things. This will sell you things to get ready for the test, and then this will, I want to sell you also, I want to prove to you that you got to take the test and there's no way you can get it better. So they work both sides of the street, and their goal is to be making money. Okay, a couple other negative ideas I want to share with you. What is being tested in most of these standardized tests, it doesn't align with the curriculum. So what we teach in our classrooms is not really being tested. So students have to go through an entire program getting ready to learn strategies, getting ready to learn how to do school, when they really need to learn how to do labs, how to figure out calculus problems, how to do improve their art and improve their bodies, those sorts of things. So it's a game, it's a strategy that's been foisted upon us. I think from a socioeconomic or just a philosophical or political standpoint, it unlevels the playing field. We all want everybody to have equal access to schools, and these standardized test barriers unlevel the playing field. They make uneven bars for people to jump over through, and consequently, this leads into my next one, it widens the gaps between the haves and the have-nots. The haves in our society have things, and the have-nots want to get those things, and the way you get them is through education. But if I'm barred from the equal access to education or contacts or the brand name schools, it's going to be a little tougher for me. Not impossible, but just a little tougher. So it's much easier for someone at a private school with lots of tutoring, lots of help, hard classes, good teachers, much easier for them to get to the Penns and the Yales and the Dartmouths than it is somebody who's in an impacted inner city school. And then this testing thing just exacerbates that problem. Okay, a bad thing in terms of students shopping for schools is they tend to pick schools based on scores. Like I've got a score of 1950, so I'm going to look at all the schools that require a 1950. And my biggest argument against this testing and for non-testing is that my argument is based on science and evidence. And let me show you what I mean by that. For 20 years, a really fine school back east in Maine, Bates College, has had a 20-year study based on students who apply using standardized test scores and students who do not submit standardized test scores. And they're still standardized test free. Bates, Bowdoin, Colby, lots of schools back there. In fact, there are 300 schools who don't require them. They keep records, and what they found out is that the students who submit scores and the students who don't submit scores graduate at basically the same rate, and their grade point average at the end is plus or minus 1 or 2%. So it's basically negligible. So what does that tell you about the need for standardized test scores? I think it's pretty strong evidence, scientific evidence. Okay, let's start with the PSAT. This is the Preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test, or the assessment test. It's done the sophomore and junior year. It's done to get you ready for the SAT. It's got a variety of purposes. It helps you get some confidence. It gives you a dry run, especially the sophomore year. It doesn't count a great deal. It also leads to some money and a variety of other things. There are 3 sections: verbal, math, and writing. And there's a scoring index of 80 for each of the 3, 80, 80, and 80, which is a total of 240. And then you come up with an index, whatever your score might be. It's basically diagnostic, and it helps counselors, it helps students. And some schools look at it for English placement and some math placement and so forth. I think math is probably the best way to go with all these, because it's hard to fudge with math numbers. You can either do things or you can't, and they're pretty reliable. Okay, a couple other things about the PSAT. There's a relationship to the SAT. You basically just add a 0, and I'm not quite sure where they get started like that. So 80 is a perfect PSAT score. 800 is a perfect SAT score. And basically, I think you can expect to improve once you take the PSAT. The next year, your score is maybe about 50 points better. And then when you jump to the SAT from the PSAT, you can count on another 100 jump of 100. So from the sophomore year to the junior year, you can maybe go up 150 points. Then if you take the SAT again, you can maybe go up another 100 points or 150. So you can start out with the PSAT of a 70, of a 1600 or a 160. You take the SAT and it becomes a 1700, and then it becomes an 1800, and then eventually you can maybe get a 1950. So that's a pretty big jump from the PSAT to the second or third SAT that you take. Okay, a couple other points. It clearly improves the SAT for most people. It also predicts the SAT fairly accurately. There's similar tests. In fact, some of the PSATs are taken from prior SAT exams. You take it sophomore year for practice. We try to have no pressure on our sophomores, and then the junior years for real. as an indicator of possibly what you need to do and where you're going to go. Now, along with the PSAT is a corporation that is sort of in bed with them. It's called the National Merit Group, and the NMSQT is part of this test. It's the National Merit Score Qualifying Test. And what they do is they try to find the best test takers in the country, not the smartest people, not the best college people, the smartest test takers, and they call them National Merit Semifinalists. Now, who gets to be those people? They take the top 15,000 scores out of virtually the millions who take the test. They identify those, they put them in a big pile, they say, here these are our National Merit Semifinalists. In California, in past few years, it's taken a 215 score on the PSAT. Now, if you don't have a 215 and you're still pretty close, in fact in California the score is a 206, they call you commended. And how do they pick those? Those are the next 35,000 scores in California to be national merit. Now in Connecticut it's a little bit higher, in Mississippi it's obviously a little bit lower, so depending on which state you're in, you have a better or a worse chance to be a national merit finalist. Okay, what do these award winners get? Well, first of all, it helps in your application to college because people raise their eyebrows. They think it's pretty clever if you're a national merit semifinalist or a finalist. And it usually ends up in some money, usually $1,500 or $2,000, could be even more, from the school, from companies, from a variety of community agencies. So it's pretty good all the way around. Students are usually notified early in the fall by their principal or guidance counselor. They have to fill out some paperwork, and then they naturally progress to become a finalist if there aren't any problems. Schools like this National Merit Program, because it's a good measure of a school. Like Harker Academy up in San Jose area has probably 45, 50 kids who are National Merit students. And whereas Stevenson is a pretty good school, but we have, at the best we will have maybe 20 total kids who have National Merit commended and finalists. York has more than we do, especially by numbers, so they've got a little richer clientele student body. Public schools don't have quite as many. So remember, this is test-taking ability. So a lot of good reasons for they have the good scores on the PSATs. Now, the big deal is the SAT one. This is the reasoning exam. I'm not even sure that you do reasoning, but that's what they call it. Scholastic, they don't even call it an assessment test anymore or an aptitude test. It's just the SAT. And that tells me that they're not sure what this thing is supposed to measure. So what's the purpose? It's a hoop to jump through. It's a way to make money. It's a way to keep people satisfied. It addresses all those issues that I talked about philosophically. Basically 3 sections. There's a verbal section, a math section, a writing section, just like the PSAT. Basic question, how many times should I take it? Well, here's a good clue. If you can score really, really well on it without any preparation, like you come in and take that test and you score 1,400 on the 2 sections or 2,100 on the 3 sections, you are golden. And I would tell you not to take it again because it looks like you're a pretty smart guy, pretty test savvy, you're going to do well in school. Now, you could take a course and raise it maybe 100 points or so, but that's not as impressive as having your counselor point out, man, this guy drilled it on the first time. Now, if you're not lucky like that, and very few people are, then I tell people, take it until you're happy with it. Keep flailing away until you get the score you want. Do whatever you need to do to get that score, and then at some point, you got to get your arms around it and accept the score that you have. Okay, now I'm going to refer to the new SAT scores. Now, it's new in terms of just a couple of years. They now have 3 scores. They've added writing. Writing used to be a subject test. So most schools still look at the 2 scores. They don't include the 3. This was all driven basically by the UC system, which was not, this is a huge customer, it's the #1 customer of the testing service, and they were not happy with the SAT exams, and nor were their professors. So we did away with the writing subject test. We added that to the SAT 1, and now there are 3 scores. So it's much more important for the UC system and the highly selective schools. They're always going to look at more information, and they really like to see the writing because basically that's what you do in writing. And parenthetically, the writing is important, and again, there's an advantage for good writers, and good writers come from very strict schools, very demanding schools, private schools, high-income postal zone schools, and again, poor people, poor schools, poor preparation suffers from this 3rd layer of the standardized testing. Again, I'm revealing a bias, but I want you to be absolutely sure where I'm coming from, and I've got a little axe to grind also about this. Okay, what else? The Ivies, Rice, Stanford, all these highfalutin schools count the writing part, and I think within a couple of years when we have more data about the writing, that more schools will count it and see the value of it. Our students tend to do a little bit better on math because we have really good math preparation, great math teachers. Not quite as good on critical reading, possibly because of me. I'm an English teacher and maybe not doing a good job. But the writing, we do really, really well in writing because we're a writing strict curriculum, and we write in history and virtually all of the classes, lots of hard, heavy papers. In fact, our students often say, private school students will say that the writing is a little easier when they get to college. So there's a benefit in a private school where there's lots of writing and lots of time for teachers to grade the papers, which public schools don't have a chance, unfortunately. So find a school that, again, that fits you in your standardized testing. Okay, a lot of details about the SAT. There are some research sections in it that have nothing to do, they're not scored, they don't count. The problem is you don't know where they are, so you have to do your best on all sections of the test. Could be in math, it could be in one section, the critical reading part, could be even part of the writing part. So, and they do that to help develop further tests. So put a smile on your face, do your best, and hope for the best with your score. Now, question, can I improve? Yes and no. Let me give you a couple examples here. Really smart son of a lady that I work with paid for a course, went up to Santa Cruz with another buddy, and they spent like 10 trips up there, 10 weekends, and he did not improve one iota. $750 down the drain, didn't test at all, didn't improve the test at all. I had a student, probably when they just counted the two scores, this one young lady went to school in northern Colorado, and she was just a great place for her. She became a star, she became an honor student, and the way she got into that school was she went from a very mediocre test score, she jumped up 300 points just in the two areas. And so she felt really confident about herself. It was just an amazing story. Just recently, this December, a couple of our seniors told me they went up like 300 points, but that's in three different sections of the course. So they could have gone up 100 in writing, 100 in reading, and 100 in math. But it's still fairly impressive. My own family, my daughter and my son were both stuck in a little rut. And they needed higher scores for the schools they wanted to go to. And they'd taken it maybe about 2 or 3 times. The last time was going to be in December, the last time they could take it. And my son, I sort of forced him to use some of my notes in a book that I use. And I could hear him in the back room, Dad, why didn't you tell me about this? And he kept shrieking out, and he was getting all these little tips. Well, the next day he took the test, and he went up like 120, 180 points and got him into that safe zone. And of course, I'm like the plumber with the leaky faucet, and he wasn't listening to me. My daughter's story, she had a really great basketball game the night before, had her 24-point high career mark, and just was so relaxed, felt so good about her. She said, I don't care how I do on this test. Well, she went in there, cleaned her mind, everything was great, and she went up like 100 points or so. So I think there's a lot to be said about your mindset, as well as some preparation. Okay, a couple other details. Recentered scores. About 15 years ago, they changed the scoring so that if parents brag about their scores compared to kids, it's not really accurate. What they did, they recentered the test about 100 points. So at the extremes, there's not that much of a difference, the low extreme, the high extreme, but in the middle, it's about a 100-point difference. So if your dad had a 1250 and you've got a 1250, you really have a better score than your dad. A couple of the details about the SAT. What does it test? Well, it tests a variety of things. There's 70 minutes you spend on critical reading. You spend 70 minutes on math, and then you spend another 35 minutes on writing. There's both multiple choice, and then there's a 25-minute essay. So that's a pretty long test. It ends up being a couple 3 hours. The whole test to administer and take it is about 4. So it's pretty onerous. It's pretty defeating for these kids. And obviously you can't do anything else the rest of that day. So you have to get ready for it. And I'll give you some tips about how you get ready for that later. What I like about the new test is a little bit more content-based. It's a little more realistic. And it's a little bit more aligned with real curriculum and the UC wishes. So it's an improvement. It's a little better test, but it's still, I'm not a fan of it. Okay, let's look at the verbal section here. Things that we can find. The critical reading, that's basically what you do in college. You read things, try to figure out what they mean, and make some sense out of them. You draw conclusions, so a little higher level reading. They used to have analogies, and they found out that they have no bearing on college, so they got rid of those. Wonderfully. Sentence completion, those could be vocabulary, those could be ideas, just a variety of ways to see how you think. And then they have passage-based reading. Maybe it's science, sometimes history, sometimes English, and you have to ferret out, topic ideas, subtext. You may have to make inferences. You have to draw conclusions. Sometimes there are 2 passages. You have to find meaning in both of them. So it's a pretty reasonable thing to do. The math section, which I'm in the dark about, but I understand it's about arithmetic and algebraic reasoning. I know it's not about calculus. So basic things you do in high school math, short of calculus. So it sort of is bad for kids who are in calculus because they've got to go back and relearn this. That's a multiple choice format, and there are also some student-generated answers, so you've got to show your work. Okay, the writing section, really important part, and it's the new section added. You have to improve sentences. That's a form of writing improvement. They have a variety of sentences, and you have to find the error, and this is a multiple guess type thing. You have to improve paragraphs, and they'll give you 3 or 4 ways to improve them. You have to pick the right one. And then the one where you really have to do something is a timed essay, and that's 25 minutes. Now, one of the things that I found out about, and I want to explain this to you, is, and I just read this last night when I was prepping here, that, and I've done some preparation for this, and I'm a reader, and I've taught my kids how to do this. They grade you on a scale of 1 to 6, and what the research has found is that almost 90% of the students who fill up the page and get like 1,200 words, they get tons and tons of words on there, they get the higher scores. You know, they get the 10s, 11, and 12s on the scores. And whereas the students who use a paragraph or less, they're always getting the low scores. Doesn't matter what the quality of writing is, but people are impressed by lots of words. And I sort of understand that. Okay, the private school range, looking at the SAT ones, you always have to look at the middle 50 percentile. Some schools you might be aware of, Whittier down south and Menlo up here. 1,000 is probably good. This is in 2 scores now. LMU and Chapman, Southern schools, 1150 to 1250. Little tougher schools back east, Boston University and Lafayette, middle 50 percentile, 1250 to 1350. Really selective schools, Colgate, Chicago. You've got to have mind-numbing numbers. These are all in the 90th percentiles, have to be pretty tough. And then the most strenuous ones, 1400 to 1550. Remember, this is the middle 50 percentile range. So they have a whole fourth of their student body who have scores higher than this. The Ivy League schools, Stanford, really selective schools. Now, in terms of public school ranges, the top UCs, now that would be Berkeley and San Diego and UCLA, you're looking at 2,000 to 2,100. They don't use the 2 scores anymore. The middle UCs, that would be Santa Barbara, Davis, Irvine. You can sort of sneak by with 1,800, 1,900. More and more of their schools are in that 2,000 range. The Cal State schools that accept most students in California, they've got a sort of a sliding scale. The higher your SATs, the lower your GPA can be. So there's a range of like 900 to 1,200 with the 2 scores, and with 3 scores it's like 1,200 to, or rather it's about 1,600 to 1,800. So you get some wiggle room there, but it's still getting more stringent with the Cal States as well. Michigan, one of the public Ivies, 1,300 to 1,400. Virginia, a little bit less at one end, a little higher at the other end. Oregon, where a lot of our schools do go, and Boulder, pretty simple, 1,100 to 1,200, and in the B range, and you got it knocked at those schools. Okay, now the adjusted scores, now by that I mean 50 percentile range with 3 scores, Menlo and Whittier, a little bit 1,500, 1,600, you can see LMU, natural progression here, Lafayette, Colgate, and then the Ivies and Stanford. So you need to find out what the schools demand and then try to comply with them. Okay, how do I go about doing these tests if you haven't done so already? How do I register? Well, there's a booklet. Go in and see your counselor, pick up the booklet, fill it out, answer the question. You can do this all online. You can do it over the phone. If you've done it one time, you can go back and do it on the phone. And you will need a credit card. This is to pay and to verify some things, and then they will give you a PIN number, and lo and behold, do not lose that PIN number, because that makes you go through the whole system again. This is what the test booklet's going to look like. You can get this in your guidance office, get it from your counselor, but most everybody's doing things online. Okay, going to the test, and there's a test late in January. We had one in December. These are the things you need to take. There's a calculator they let you use for the math portion. A watch so you can time yourself, 2 pencils, one will break. Obviously the registration ticket that's got all the information will prove you belong. An ID to prove who you are, and then directions to get there, obviously. You want to know how to get to North County, to Salinas and Hartnell, or rather Seaside High School where they're given. And then I would try to sneak in a little snack. You'll have a little break, and 4 hours you're going to need to replenish the calories. What you cannot bring, what you need to leave at home, notes, dictionary, books, written things, all these tools, a highlighter. Boy, if I could sneak one in there, I'd use a highlighter, but you're not supposed to. It helps with the reading. Any electronic listening devices, phones, cameras, iPhones, and the reason they want you to get rid of those is because years ago, people were taking the test on the East Coast, and they were sending the answers to people taking the test on the West Coast 3 hours later. and there was massive fraud, and they had to sort of undo that. Okay, key bit of information for a lot of our listeners here. There is a fee waiver. Excuse me, fee waiver. In other words, you can take this test for free. What does it take? Well, it takes a certain income. If you're basically on free and reduced lunch, or you have one parent missing, or you're just not making enough money in the family, just go in and talk to your counselor. It's available for all these tests. Certainly available for the applications then, but you have to prove that you've taken, used the waiver on the test. If there's any problems, say they're out of the waivers, go in and talk to your counselor, and they will oftentimes take a letter that your counselor can type up. All right, here's my problem with the test. What does it predict? It predicts race, and I think that's a negative thing. It describes race. It also describes income. And let me get back to race. The people who do best are people with an Asian background. Next best are white people, the next best are Hispanics, and the lower group, the next group are blacks, and then the bottom group are Native Americans. And we could all conjecture some reasons why, but that's a negative thing. Income, obviously the more money you make, the better your score, and the lower you make, the worse your score. If your parents are highly educated, you tend to do better. If they haven't been educated, obviously the score's most likely going to be lower. So this is a class determiner, or describer. And that's not a good thing. Also, it also predicts gender. We can look at scores, you can make an educated guess that somebody's a male or a female. The good thing about it, one thing it does predict, it doesn't predict who's going to graduate from college or who's going to do best or whatever. It does predict first year success. People with higher scores tend to do better their freshman year. Okay, let's look at some other real specific things here about predictions. Or about some options. Say you don't like the SAT, you don't like what you're doing. What are your alternatives? What else can you do here? Well, you can take a course on a computer. You can sign up with Ivy West or Sylvan, one of these local groups. We have our kids do Revolution Prep. You can hire a tutor individually by these groups. They're very, very expensive. You can do a weekend course. USC has one, I know. Princeton Review, Kaplan, all these groups are about $750, $800, maybe $1,000. But online courses are usually cheaper, $60 or so. Test Method Prep is one, Thompson-Peterson College Board. And all you have to do is Google, go to these sites, Kaplan site, Revolution Prep Test site, Princeton Review, Sylvan, or you could buy a book. Here's an example of a book that tells you how to crack this thing, and they're all over the place. Just go to Borders. Okay, but the ideal preparation, if you could go back in time and affect DNA and all that, you want to make sure that you are a single child. You have no brothers and sisters because they happen to score a little bit better. They also happen to be higher representation with gifted students. Make sure your parents are very, very smart because then you'll become smart. Make sure your parents are making over $100,000 because the higher their income, the better your score is going to be. And of course, all of this is ludicrous. You can't control those things. So what can you control? You can control, in many cases, rigorous coursework. You have to qualify for it, fight for it, earn it, take the hardest courses you can. Have a lifetime of reading. Never go anywhere without a pocketbook in your back jean pocket. Okay, if you absolutely can't do it with the SATs, look at some of these SAT optional schools. There are over 300 of them. The ones that we know about, have been doing it for a long time, are the schools in part of the NESCAC, the New England Small College Athletic Conference. Bowdoin, Bates, and Colby, never going to use SATs. They've got other ways to accept you. Middlebury's in that group, although they have some standardized testing they like to see. Hamilton's test-free, Connecticut's test-free. Wheaton in Mass. Holy Cross went to it just recently, and that's a great school in Massachusetts. They're in that Patriot League. And Wake Forest, the super athletic league down in the ACC, they just decided this year to drop testing. Dickinson in Pennsylvania, Muhlenberg in Pennsylvania, Lewis and Clark, where a lot of our kids go up in Oregon, Pitzer down south, one of the Claremonts, and then many of the Cal States can be test optional. Mount Holyoke, that's a women's school back in Massachusetts. So a lot of good schools will fit a variety of tastes and so forth. Now, there's a group back east called Fair Test, and they're obviously against all of this. You can Google their site, get on there. They've got tons of information. They've influenced me a little bit. But I want you to read along with me and look at this statement they make. The College Board's research, their own research, this is the wolf we're talking about, shows there's a direct relationship between family income and SAT scores. So for every extra $10,000 a family makes, a child's combined math and verbal score goes up 12 to 31 points. Children whose parents make 50 grand, they're at 996. Compared to somebody whose parents make 40,000, they're at 967, but they're worse than families who make 60,000. 1014. Imagine if your parents make 300,000, what your score might be. So there's definitely some things wrong with the tests. Okay, so there's a bias towards income. There's a generation or a gender gap, and it works both ways. The ladies do a little bit better on some of the writing. The guys tend to always do better on the math. But overall, believe it or not, the guys are doing a little bit better. There are fewer of them taking it. And there's something going on in our schools with men and women. I hope that's changing, but guys tend to have, a little bit of a break. Whites definitely have a break over Hispanics and blacks and natives, Native Americans. Asians have the best chance. Okay, what does it mean to have a high score in the SAT-1? Well, there are 540 scores every year of the 16 that have 1,600. This is from millions and millions of people who take it. So you would think they'd get in everywhere. Well, they don't. Harvard turns down hundreds and hundreds of people with perfect scores. Well, how can they do that? They also turn down valedictorians and all sorts of wonderful credentials because they want a diverse school. So, but for most people, if you have these numbers, the 700, 700, 700, in those range, you're basically in the 2100 range based on a perfect 2400, you've got some good scores. You're going to have lots and lots of choices. What else does it mean to have a good score? Well, you get recruited, because people buy and sell these lists of scores. You get lots of help with selective schools because they look at these SAT-2s and they also look at the high scores on the ones. You get merit scholarships. And again, I want to point out it's really a kiss of death when you have this low GPA and a high score. Okay, learning differences. What if I have a learning difference? What if I've got some troubles with the way school is? Well, it seems like there's a mad dash by the white community to get certified to have a learning difference for their kids because they get a little different, they get a little advantage. They get more time taking the test, which results in a higher score. So the vast majority of people with learning differences happen to be upper class white families, and they're sort of gaming the system. If you have a legitimate ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, a problem like that, get it checked, just like you would have a heart program, a problem. Go to, get certified and send all the documentation in, and you get a little longer time on the test, and obviously it should result in extended time or 50% or maybe even 100% more time. They used to put an asterisk there, and it was sort of a stigma against you, but they don't do that anymore. They're not allowed. So it can't hurt you. No problem. Look into that with your counselor because you want to get the high scores you can. Okay, about these scores, simple advice. Don't wait. Do something. If you don't like the score, do something about it. Now, don't look at these average scores. Look at the middle 50 percentile. That really tells you what's going on. And most schools keep that in mind, that most schools are only looking at the first two, so you got to focus on the critical reading and the math. The third one, writing, people don't pay quite as much attention to. For most schools, SAT scores are the second to third, fourth most important criteria. And remember, the more selective the school, the more important it is. Okay, a little bit more advice here. Recognize and work on your own weakness. Pay for the test booklet, then you can see how you did and where you can improve on it. Don't miss the registration dates, because when it's gone, and it costs more to do standby, it costs more for late registration. Don't make mistakes when you're registering, like make sure you have the same name. And over a lifetime, try to read more and watch less TV so you can be a better student. Another cheap, easy way to do it is just hang around smart people. They've got better vocabulary, you learn from them, they've got good ideas, and birds of a feather. And take hard classes. Try to get into AP classes with your gifted buddies if you can. Okay, this is what the scores look like, this hierarchy of scores. The lottery schools, really high scores, the Ivies and Stanford. The really selective schools, 1350, these are the Colgates, Bostons, and so forth. Just merely selective schools, Santa Clara, Lehigh, Boston, and then just regular selective schools. That means they reject some people, and that would be Menlo, St. Mary's, those type of schools. Okay, quick job here with the SAT-2. These are subject tests. They're content-based. I think they're much more reasonable. 3 are required for most schools, although the UC system now only requires 2. It's your choice. You take whatever you're good at, except for if you want to be an engineer, you should probably take a science class, a couple of science classes, some math classes. And again, you're going to look at the percentage and not the score, because your score can be a little bit lower, but the percentage, 94th percentile, 80th percentile, so forth, can be higher. So it's a little different grading system for the SAT-2s. These tests, the SAT-2s, are used by some test optional schools. Like they don't require the SAT-1, but they might want to look at the 2. Middlebury would be a case in mind here. But clearly they're much more important for the UCs. And I think they're a much better predictor of college success People who do best on those tend to graduate quicker, faster, and from harder schools. Okay, basically they're harder than the SAT ones. It's a self-selecting group. Very elite students take them. Very elite colleges want them. You can prepare for them, and they're often used for placement. Like you can skip a science class, you can go right into organic, the kiss of death. You can go into a higher math class and so forth. Take a look at this list of SAT 2 exams. Math 1 and 2, chemistry, history, a variety of tests, including the language. So you pick one out that you're really good at, bone up for it. You can buy a book like this, SAT 2 practice test book. You can take classes and so forth. Now, how does the UC differ now with the UCs, or with the SAT 2s? Well, they no longer require writing. They don't require math, but if you take math, it must be math 2. They don't take the 1C anymore. And here's the kicker, especially if you're a non-native speaker, the UCs don't distinguish the home language. So our international students, our Chinese students, our Korean students, they'll take the test in their own language, and they're always getting 790, 800. And that's sort of unfair to natives to this country, but UC hasn't caught on yet, and they still accept those. Okay, a couple things to keep in mind. The SAT 2 is not given regularly. 1 or 2 fewer times during the year. They're 3-hour exams, basically about a 45-minute exam. It takes an hour to do them. You can do all 3. That's what I would suggest. Some people do 1 or 2. They shop around, but as long as you're there, you should take all 3, register for them. There's too much. You can't take them on the same day as the SAT 1. You used to be able to do that years ago. That's no longer the case. Lots of examples of practice books that we put on the site. You can Google those. You can get a tutor, and it's good you can focus. And it's probably wise to spend time on this because you're getting content. You're getting smarter. You're getting better. You're really getting an education. They used to do something called score choice where you could send some in and not others in. You can't do that anymore. Every time you take an SAT, the schools see the SAT 1, the 2, the PSA. You can't hide anything. But that doesn't matter because they tend to take the best scores and use those on your behalf. If you need some advice about this, see your teacher, see your counselor. Your math teacher will tell you which one you should be taking. Get some advice before you start preparing. Okay, what else do I need to know about testing? When do I take them? When you're ready. Take the SAT 2s, especially after you finish the course. Like our juniors finish usually chemistry. They'll be finishing US history, AP US history in the spring. So you want to take that close to the end of the course so you don't lose that, develop rust in the pipes and lose all that learning that's fresh. How do you sign up? You do it online through the booklet. Get some help with that. How many times should you take it until you get it right, as much as you can stomach? If you don't test well, there's going to be a variety of choices. You can prepare for it. You can avoid it altogether. Go to schools that don't require the tests. How do I sign my name? Exactly like it's on your transcript, so that colleges won't mix up the two and set up 2 different folders for you and files. You need to know your school code, the CEEB code, because it doesn't change. It's the same one for the SAT and the ACT. Our code happens to be there, but you need to learn your school code. You also need to learn your Social Security number. You'll need that for the applications. Where do I take the tests? Seaside High School, mainly for the peninsula, North County for people that live out near there, over at Salinas for the people in the valley. Do I need a Social Security number? Absolutely not. It can help prove and track things, but if you're not a citizen, you won't have one, so it doesn't hold it against you. Okay, senior year testing, this is what you should be doing. In September, you're going to take the SAT 1. You've got 1 time to take. In November, I would suggest you take the 2 if the school requires the SAT 2. December, I would take the test where you need the most help. You know, the buck up on the 1 or buck up on the 2. You can also take it in January, but that's you're pushing it there. It's the last time for the UCs in December. This next couple of weeks in January is the absolute last viable test date. You're sort of taking a risk, but you still can take it. Juniors, too many people are taking it too early junior year. This is what I suggest. We make everybody take the PSAT in October for the second time. Sometimes that's the first time for people. We have people wait until March for the SAT 1. A lot of kids are taking it in the fall a couple times. This is their 3rd time. They take it 3 more times in the fall. That's too much, the senior. That's just way too much. You can get burnout and discouraged. Take it in March. It gives you an idea of how to do a diagnosis. You can get ready. You can take some courses. We can do our counseling properly. We can even do counseling from the PSAT scores. But generally, the SAT is good to do once in the spring. After that, in May, if you haven't taken it in March, take the SAT 1 in May, Or if you're going to be one of the 2 takers, take the SAT 2 in May. The problem is it gets in the way of the AP exam, it gets in the midst of finals, it gets in the way of Disneyland, graduation, all this stuff. So be wary of scheduling too much stuff in May. A better time is probably June. Take the 1 or the 2 in June. Usually school's out, you can focus on that, relax a little bit. It's a good time. Over the summer, there's just really no time to take it. I think I'm going to stop right here. There's some things I wanted to talk about that I'm obviously going to have to push to my next session. I don't want to rush through it. I want to do a good job here. I want to talk about the ACT, which is the American College Testing. It's different. It's a little optional. It's honored everywhere as long as you do the writing portion if you're going to go to those selective schools and the UCs. A little different grading scale, but I want to go into detail with that. About the same amount of money, test more content. I've got a little more of an affinity for that, so I want to share some things with you about the ACT. I also want to talk about the TOEFL, and that's for students who need to prove that they can use the language. And then I want to talk about the AP exams, which are becoming much more important. So those 3 exams we'll hold off and talk about in the next time. And I also want to talk about some test-taking tips. There's some things you can do to get ready, little strategies, some things like that. So let's bring this to a close. Let's think about where we are with testing. Okay, philosophically, testing is a hoop that we have to jump through. We have to do it. What you have to do is find out about yourself, get some advice, read some books, take a course, talk to your teachers, find out your strengths and weaknesses. If you can, sign up for the PSATs early to use those as a springboard diagnosis to jump to the ones. Prepare for, you might want to take the SAT ones blind. No preparation, go in there, relax, see how you do. And then once you know your strengths and weaknesses, continue to build on the strengths, but really focus on the weakness so that you have a game plan, work on it systematically. I would do this in the summertime. That's why it's good to do it in the spring. Get ready in the summertime, use all your energy there so it doesn't detract from real school. Talk to some kids who've been through it. If you're a junior, talk to some seniors who've done it. And maybe go to some service groups, talk to some people that can help you pay for it if it's a big deal. But it's a really important thing. I wish we didn't have to do it, but it's an important thing. So get ready for the standardized test score. But keep in mind, testing is just one of the things. The big issue is how you do in school. Hard classes, hard school, good testing on content with your class, and really prove that you're a learner, okay? Create this academic portfolio. On the other hand, don't forget about you as a person. There should be 2 things that you're developing. 2 passions, and it's hard to develop a passion when you're a kid, I know, but some kids have been in gymnastics all their lives. Some athletes have played baseball or football forever. Some kids have done the flute since middle school. If you're not one of those kids who's done this lifelong thing, you still have time, but the sands of time are dropping through. You need to find something that you can hang your hat on and do a really good job at. And what they like to see, the academics, then they like to see the non-academics, you as a person, because all of these schools grade you academically and they grade you as a person, and develop this person side. Some of you maybe have the person side developed too much. You maybe need to look back and spend more time with this academics. But it's a union of these things. They look at both things. For the more select schools, the more private schools, the smaller schools that don't rely just on numbers. And you can get some help for that. It's not too late. And that's something that virtually everybody can do. Plus it's fun. You're going to do some things through your lifetime and you're going to rely on the person side through all of your life. You're not going to be a student, you're not going to do tests. In fact, this will be the last time you have to do all of this junk and then you can put it away and it's over. Like our seniors are just wild, they're crazy. They don't have to do any of that stuff. Maybe until med school or law school or biz school or whatever. But once you get it done, it's out of the way. Okay, we've had a good session on financial aid. We're learning a little bit about schools. We've learned about getting recommendations and doing interviewing. I think we took a good stab at standardized testing. We talked about the meat and potatoes. We talked about SAT 1s and SAT 2s. We'll learn about the other ones the next time. I want to thank thank all of you for paying attention and learning here and sticking in here with me. A lot of details and facts and maybe some dry or boring information, but it's stuff that you need to know. And if you didn't get enough here, you can give us a call, email, talk to your counselors, talk to your teachers. So thanks for being with us, both the parents and the students. And I invite you to be with us in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about thinking about college. We're going to talk about some philosophical things. We'll also finish up the standardized test deal. I want to remind you to look at iTunes and also look at Vimeo to look at some of these past issues. And I want to close with my mantra and my advice, things I hang my hat on. Just remember that it's never too late to start It's never too early to start thinking about college. You don't want to be too early in junior high, those sorts of things. Never too early to think about college. It's never too late to get started. Even if you're a senior, there's still some places that you can be looking at. So this is Dave Miller, Director of College Counseling at Stevenson, wishing you good luck in your search for the right school, and have a good 2 weeks until we meet again.